Welcome to the place where brains collide with science, wit, and a nerdy vibe. I'm Dr. Angel. Let's dive in where psychology meets a clever spin. Stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy.
Have you ever set a boundary with someone and suddenly you're too sensitive or overreacting or, you know, being dramatic again? Listen, if asking for basic respect turns into a crime scene reenactment, you might be dealing with more than just a communication hiccup. Hi, I'm Dr. Angel, and this is Nerdy Psychology, your home for emotional empowerment, brain science, and, well, occasional sarcasm. This is our second episode in our Signs of Toxic Relationship series. Today's focus is on manipulation. I know that masquerades as love, like guilt bombs or subtle control, and those things like, I'm just trying to help, actually means I really want to run your whole entire life and take over. So if your gut says, something ain't right, stick around, hit subscribe, and let's get real together. We're trying to give you tools to reclaim your power because, well, healing isn't passive, it's bold. And, well, maybe just a little nerdy. We're going to talk about our people who deflect accountability. These are people who completely rewrite history to avoid any responsibility, any blame. They forget a commitment, but they blame you for you didn't remind them. Somehow you end up apologizing for their missed responsibility. Yeah, they're really, really good at turning things around. So this tactic that they use is they gaslight small things to make you doubt big things. And so these people are really good at deflecting and shifting that focus right onto something else so that they're not having just accountability and responsibility. And you'll hear it in their narratives because as they talk about what's happening, it's always someone else's fault, everything. And so that's definitely a huge sign that you're dealing with somebody who struggles to accept responsibility. And so some common red flags in this relationship, and it can show up very subtly. It's very emotionally manipulative, for one. And it really makes people like question their own reality. So when you have that relationship with that person, that the history, the experience, like it is completely not what history was, that's definitely a flag to kind of go, okay, what's happening here? What's the motive? What am I feeling in here? Kind of take a look at that, because people who can't take responsibility are not healthy people, because we all make mistakes. We all get it wrong sometimes. And a person who's healthy is able to say, you know what, I really just dropped the ball on this and please forgive me. Or I'm late. That's on me. I did not plan my time accordingly and apologize for it, but own it. Or I got stuck in traffic because I really just didn't leave early enough to account for rush hour today, or whatever that case may be. But taking that responsibility is really a healthy trait. And so when we're around those people who can't do it, we really just need to have some boundaries for that. The flaky friend. Yeah. Okay. We all have the flaky friend. You plan this really elaborate dinner party, like 4 weeks, and you have all your friends invited and everybody knows the time, and you've done all this back work, and your friend's like, hey, can I help you? Is there something I can pick up? And you're like, yeah, could you grab ice on your way over? And they're like, yeah, I'm going to get there early so I can help you set up. And they show up 45 minutes after your party has started with like no warning, no text, no heads up, no apology. And then when you like say something to them later, they're like, well, if you would have planned it at a different time, or if you didn't live over here where there's so much traffic, or if you picked a different place where there was better parking, I wouldn't have been late. Like they flipped that script. And so they go back to that flaky friend uses that deflection. So just like we just talked about, instead of owning that mistake, their tardiness, they shift the blame on anything else besides them, or totally ignore it and they act like they don't know what you're talking about when you're like, hello, I was waiting for that ice. Everybody's been waiting. We've been waiting for you. And they just don't seem to understand or to get that. Um, or the flaky friend can also be the person who you made plans with. You guys confirm plans. You're looking forward to plans. And like the day of the plans, they just don't return your calls or texts, or they don't show up. And you're left wondering, are we still doing this? Do I go? Or you're disappointed because you were looking forward to this thing and there's no communication. That flaky friend just kind of is in something else and you don't know. When we make plans with people, things come up, life happens, right? Like there's no such thing as I'm making plans with my friends and every time we make a plan, it's going to come through to fruition. No, because life does happen and we need to have some of that flexibility. But the flaky friends don't communicate. They just kind of drop it and go silent and ghost you, or they just don't show up at all. And you're trying to call and you're trying to text and they're not answering and they're not responding. And then if and when you do get a hold of them, it's, oh, I dropped my phone in the toilet, or I had my phone on silent, or I got busy doing this, or I fell asleep. And again, not taking responsibility or accountability and not apologizing for the most part too. The gaslighting roommate. Ooh, yeah. You ask your roommate why they didn't take out the trash and like they said they would, and they're like, uh, look, you're always on my back about chores. It's like, you're just trying to control me. Why don't you just do it because it's bothering you so much? Again, another deflection method. And they make you feel guilty for asking them to do something they agreed to do. And it makes you feel overwhelmed at times. Emotionally immature partner. They raise their voice at you during a disagreement, and later when you try to talk about it calmly, they say, you know how I get when you push my buttons. If you weren't so dramatic, I wouldn't act like that. What? Complete deflection. They just justify their behavior by framing you as the problem. The guilt tripping parent. You gently bring up that their constant negative comments about your career or your life or your choices are so discouraging, and they respond, I sacrificed everything for you to have these opportunities. And now you're saying I'm the bad parent? Again, more deflection. They're derailing that conversation and they're framing your boundary as an attack. We have the passive aggressive coworker. You ask that colleague why they didn't email the client the updated report like they said they would, and they reply, well, I would have, but I didn't know you wanted it so urgently. Like you didn't say ASAP in the message. Again, deflection. Instead of acknowledging the drop ball, they focus on your tone, your phrase. They get super semantical and they use that to twist it back on you. And so those are all really great examples of deflection. The chronic excuse maker, like you hire someone to help with like a task in your small business, and then maybe they don't finish the work they said they were going to, and then you follow up with them and they're like, honestly, I just have so much going on and the way you wrote the instructions wasn't very clear. Again, deflection. I hope you're seeing a pattern in all of this deflection examples. And I really wanted to go through a lot of different kinds of examples because this is a classic toxic behavior trait. And so instead of saying, hey, I just didn't manage my time well. They blame the circumstances on your poor or your lack of communication or on something you did or didn't do. So, what do all of these examples have in common? You end up questioning yourself. The original issue never gets addressed. You might even apologize for bringing it up, twisting the narrative. Okay, this happens. Like, all right, they subtly change stories or narratives to make themselves look like the hero or like the victim. So you witness them being rude to a server at a restaurant. And then later, they tell others that the server was so hostile toward me. And I had to stand up and advocate for myself because I am not going to let people treat me like that. Twisting the narrative is one of the most disorienting toxic behaviors because it warps reality just enough to make you question your own perception or experience. And you sit there and you're like, wait, did I miss something? I don't remember that waitress being hostile. Like it really makes you question your own experience and perception. So, kind of in the same realm here is like we have this social person who is sabotaging. So, you confide in a friend about needing space from someone in your little friendship circle because maybe they're just draining you right now. And then later you find out, guess what you find out? That your friend told the other person that you were talking trash. And then when you confront the friend, they say, I didn't say anything bad. I just told them that you were a little overwhelmed and needed space. I was just trying to help clear the air. So, like, the twist is they reframe betrayal as being helpful, even though they totally broke your trust and they fueled and caused drama. Oh, the weaponized roommate situation. We have you and your roommate agreeing on a quiet night so you can study. And they invite people over anyway. And then when you bring it up, they're like, you didn't specifically say no guests. You just said you needed quiet. We're being quiet for a party. Like, this is ignoring the spirit of the agreement and they're reframing it. They're taking their violation and they're getting that semantical and technicality, and they're acting like you're the person who couldn't communicate or you had unclear expectations or you're just overreacting. I don't know what's wrong with you. Or having a partner who makes sarcastic remarks about your appearance in front of your friends or their friends. And you tell them it hurts your feelings when they do that because we're trying to learn to be open, honest communicators, right? And then they respond with, you're so sensitive. Everyone was laughing. It was clearly a joke. You're always trying to make me the bad guy here. What just happened? They just rewrote your emotional response as irrational. And then, and then, and then they cast themselves as the misunderstood victim, turning the focus away from the hurtful behavior. So, why does all this work on a temporary level? Because it does on a temporary level. And I know I've given a lot of examples on these things because I really want you to be able to see them from multiple perspectives. But twisting the narrative works because it blurs the emotional truth in the moment. It makes you question, am I overreacting? Did I really see that? Did I really experience that? And while you're questioning the reality that you just had or the experience or your feelings, it's allowing the toxic person to dodge responsibility while appearing reasonable, logical, helpful, chronic dishonesty. Okay, these are lies that are sprinkled through their stories like little glitter. They're annoying and they're everywhere. They say they're homesick with a migraine and they need to reschedule hanging out with you. But then you see them posting selfies at like the karaoke joint that evening. And then when you ask them about it, they say, well, I took my medicine and my migraine went away and it wasn't planned. It just happened. So, like, what's really going on? Well, this is an individual who's not being honest about their priorities or their intentions. And so, rather than saying, hey, can we reschedule? Or I got something else to do that I didn't know, or I just need space, they lie to preserve their image and avoid confrontation. And the problem is, this completely breaks down trust in relationships. So here's a vibe check, because I'm a big one on, like, our bodies tell us so much if we just stop and listen to what our bodies are saying. So individual stories rarely add up. Trust your gut, not their version necessarily. I always say trust and verify. It goes together. If today's episode made you think, wait, that happened to me, just know you're not alone and it's not your fault. Recognizing toxic dynamics is the first step in protecting your peace and, well, rebuilding your self-trust. You don't need permission to set boundaries. You need support. And that's what we're building here together. If you found this helpful, go ahead and like that video, subscribe to Nerdy Psychology, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss an episode. And tell me in the comments, what's one subtle red flag you didn't recognize until later? You might help someone else connect the dots. Don't forget, next week, we're going to be doing the episode 3 of this series. So we can talk about emotional scorekeeping and that, weird feeling when relationships start to feel like debt. Until then, stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy. That's a wrap.
Stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy.